You're listening to the Vendor's Daughter podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Calderon, also known as the Vendor's Daughter. I started this podcast about 7 years into working at my family's business. At the time, and really ever since, I've been geeking out on two main topics: self-improvement and business growth and development. I firmly believe that the healthier we are, both mentally and physically, the better we show up for ourselves, our lives, and our businesses. So, on the show, we talk a lot about things like a positive mindset, why what you eat matters, why it's important to move your body, and how a gratitude practice can change your life. And because growing a business is my favorite topic ever, we also interview entrepreneurs from various fields so that they can share how they grew their business. Which means along the way, we'll also talk about things like email list, growing an Instagram, and knowing when it's time to hire your next employee. You guys, the only thing I might like to talk about more than business is coffee. I love coffee. So grab a fresh cup and listen in as we deep dive into all the things. Thank you so much for being on the show, and for our audience, can you tell them who you are and a little bit about your company?
Sure. So thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So I am the way I always describe myself is like a former corporate ladder climber turned entrepreneur. So for anyone listening who thinks, I'm never going to be able to leave this corporate job and do something else, that was definitely my path. I did it kind of the riskiest way, which was I jumped out of the plane without a parachute and started from zero revenue and tried to build it from the ground up. And luckily it's worked out. 10 years later, we're in a really good place, but I typically don't recommend that approach for everybody. It's kind of do what I say, not what I do. Today, I run a business called Brilliant Balance, which is a personal development platform for professional women. We really are in business to help women stand in their brilliance and fulfill their highest potential. Like that's what gets me up in the morning. That is the biggest, most exciting thing that I can do for people. And we have all kinds of content and coaching opportunities and community to help women do that.
Wow, I love it. I love this idea of helping women like live up to their highest potential. But we were talking a little bit a minute ago, and you're celebrating 20 years of marriage. You have 3 kids. You have this business that you started from the ground and are making it work these last 10 years. Do you think that that there is such a thing as balance in all of that? Like, what is work-life balance,
Yeah,
or is
I
it?
fundamentally do think there is. And it's becoming like an unpopular opinion. I think
It is, yeah.
maybe a little bit of a history lesson. So, I'm 45. So I was in school primarily in the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
And my generation of women, I think we grew up being told we could fundamentally have it all, right? We could have whatever career we wanted. The generation prior sort of had very limited options, maybe three that were typically nurses and teachers and administrative work. And my generation was the first one to really blow the doors off of like everything is possible. But nowhere in that did anyone ever talk about how you were supposed to manage it once you had it, right?
Yeah.
And the underlying supposition was there was an infrastructure in place for one person in the household to have it all, right? While someone
Mhm.
else at home was kind of keeping the home fires burning and managing everything. And when we broke that paradigm by saying two people can go out and do challenging and substantial work that takes a significant amount of time away from home, we didn't change the infrastructure about how are we
Yeah.
really going to get everything else done. And so that created this pressure of we didn't alleviate pressure anywhere else when we went and took on new pressure. Right. And so
Yeah.
that's really fundamentally, that's the societal issue I'm trying to solve for. And rather than solving it systemically and saying, all right, I'm going to go, be an advocate or work for reform of the way we do childcare, I'm looking at solving it at the individual level. How does an
Mm.
individual make a collective set of choices that they're at peace with, but that allows each of us individually to feel like we have the balance that we want, right? And so what
Yeah.
you said is their balance. It's not like the kind of balance where you can take a pie chart and divide it into equal parts and say, this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
It's a more dynamic version of balance where I view it as like needing to stay on your toes and be able to transition from, point to point in your day or in your life where when you drop in, like you're all there, right? You can land that
Right.
pose, you can really make that moment matter. And while this
Mm.
moment with you might be about my work, an hour from now, I'm going to be all in with my husband and kids. So it's being able to dance between those with a strong core, right? And a lot of
Yeah.
grace. And that's the vision of balance I'm chasing.
I love that idea of the dance in between it. It makes me think of good country songs. But I I was looking through your Instagram, and there was something transition rituals that you had talked about, and you said how about like transitioning, because that's something that's really hard for me. Like I'll close this down, and I could just stay in the podcast realm all day long and just totally negate the fact that I have a husband
Mhm.
downstairs. Or when I'm with him, I still might be thinking about the podcast or the business or a million other things that I have to do.
Yes.
So, while you're trying to create that dynamic balance, how do you transition in between the phases?
It's so important, honestly, Jennifer, because I think I call them threshold rituals, right? This what do
Mm,
you do when you are crossing from one zone or one role that you play in your life into another? And it can be powerful, sort of certainly at a macro level where you're saying I'm moving from work to family, but it's also powerful at a micro level, right? Where I
mm,
may be going from, okay, I'm making dinner to we're eating dinner and I now have five voices that are trying to find their space at that table to I'm one on one with one child who needs to be working on a science fair project and needs my full attention. Each of those things requires sort of a
mm,
micro transition, right? Where I take a beat and ask myself, who do I need to be in
mm,
this moment? Right? How do I need to show up in this moment? Because we all know what it feels like. If you walk downstairs to see your husband and you're still in podcast land and you're
yeah,
trailing that energy and that headspace and things are still trying to solve for, you're not going to show up as the wife that
no,
you want to, right? Same thing with children for sure. And they can smell it. I mean, they know,
yeah,
right? If you're not in the zone. So I think I'm not always perfect at this by any means, but
sure,
that intentionality around saying, can I take a beat and transition? And I'll tell you, this year has strained this. I mean, so many of
yeah,
us are doing everything under one roof. Or we were at some point during this year, that those threshold rituals became even more important, although more metaphorical, right? We weren't stepping across that literal threshold. We didn't have a commute. We weren't coming
yeah,
in the door at the end of the day, but it was still important to say, all right, can they respect that I'm in a work zone and they're not going to get the energy from me that they want if they're interrupting
right.
right now? And then can I shut it down well enough to be fully in that next mode?
So good. I found that very difficult, even just with us both working from home, not having children. I'm just like, oh man, like how do you kind of set those boundaries to say like, no, this is my work time? Like, what does that even work like? Or is a boundary a good word for saying that?
Well, no, I think in my experience, the
Yeah.
most important thing is well, there's kind of two words. It's intention. Do you have an intention about how this day is going to unfold?
Mm,
Do you wake up in the morning and say, I can tell you with a fairly high level of certainty when I'm going to be me, myself, and I, right? Taking
yeah.
care of me. That's like working out or going to do something that's just for you or running an errand, doing, hair and makeup in the morning, whatever it is. Can I tell you when I'm going to be in service to someone in my family or in connection or relationship with? And can I
Yeah.
tell you when I'm going to be working? And if if
Mm,
if you don't start with that intention, then there's nothing to be in integrity to, right? And the other half of that
mm,
equation is integrity. So it's then once you have the plan, do you do what you say you're going to do? So if you
so
tell him, I'm going to be done at 4 o'clock, are you done at 4? Right? Or
yeah.
you say you'll be done at 4 and really it's 5:30.
Ooh. Oh,
Out, right?
no.
I know. I know. So I think what we want is we want the people in our life, whether they're at work, like our work team, or whether they're our
Mhm.
home team, we want them to know they can count on us.
Oh,
That
so
we're a good
true.
team member in those two zones.
So good. Oh gosh. I'm like, well, I've got some work to go do. So
Right. Well, and it's
gosh,
so
it's so
easy.
good
I
to
mean,
that.
for you as an entrepreneur, it's so easy to have it bleed over into
Yeah.
a 24-hour day because, it's in our heads all day. So it does take some work to learn, like, how am I going to turn this channel off for a while so that I can tune into a different channel? Um,
So true.
and the people closest to us probably suffer the most because we know they'll
Yeah.
tolerate it.
Very true. I like what you said about it not always being like equal pieces of the pie per se, and that it is more of this fluid dance. Because I do think sometimes I think, oh no, well, work has to be in the morning, like during these 6 hours, and then my workout can only be in these hours. And it's like, no, actually, like on your lunch, you can go get your workout in, or you can fluctuate in between
Yeah.
the different zones. You don't have to stick in one all day long and then like do one massive switch.
Yeah,
So
there's different styles. I mean, some people are better at integration where, like you're saying, there's kind of rapid switching throughout the day. Some people, myself included, work best in like I like to know I have a long block for work
yeah, I
and
do
that
too.
that's the zone I'm in. And then it's easier for me to kind of pack it up for the day and try to tie a bow around it until tomorrow. And if I were in and out, like there's so much friction loss in every one of those transitions that
Yeah.
um, I personally like it better to have it be separated. But I coach plenty of women who are like, I have to have this integration where there's more rapid switching back and forth.
I love that. I just love that there's room for every personality type in that the systems you have in place can work for everybody and every lifestyle. So um you have this business again, the family, you're like seem like you're operating at a high level. And so how do you have like specific strategies that you use, or like what could someone listening do right now to implement that into their lives?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that, first of all. Some days are definitely better than others. So we'll
Yeah.
acknowledge that. But I think that there is a little bit of a secret, right? There's a little bit of a playbook or a formula that I've
Yeah.
had to think really hard about. If I go back to my corporate life when I was working in a big corporate marketing job, global team, lots of noise, right? Lots of
Mhm.
travel, lots of hours. um I had to learn systems there that because I was in like a pressure tested environment and I already had two of my three children that translated into this next life. So, one thing I have in this chapter is a little bit more control
Mm.
over where my time goes, what I say yes and no to, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't have a boss who says you have to be here at this time.
Right.
But plenty of my clients do. And so what we've had to learn is how do we teach people that you have a lot more control and choice than you're probably claiming, right?
Ooh.
Most of us would say I don't have a lot of choice. I mean, my
Mhm.
kids have to be at school at this time and I have to be at work at this time. And, there's just no time to work out and I can't possibly get enough sleep. And we all know the narrative around kind of this hot mess that's like, it doesn't really, we never feel very good, but we act like that's normal. And
Yeah.
I fundamentally believe that, like, not only can we do better, but we have to do better, right? We
Mm.
have to do better than that. And it really, Jennifer, becomes pretty simple. It's like it starts with, do you know how to run a powerful day?
Ooh.
Do you know how to wake up feeling rested and energized and like kind of positive and excited about what you get to do that day? Do you have a good mindset? And can you
Mm.
stay in that frame? And it's physical energy, it's mental
Yeah.
energy, it's emotional and spiritual. Like, are you as a human operating kind of with a high capacity for energy? Do you have a high
Mm.
vibe, right? Might be one way to think about it. And those are very controllable factors. There's a lot you can do to optimize that. If somebody is listening saying like, "Ooh, I'm struggling with that," well, that's
Yeah.
okay. There's lots you can do to get that in shape. And then I think the next piece of the puzzle is, do you have your arms around where your time goes? Kind of like we were talking about before. Do you have a plan? Can you stay in integrity to that plan? That's really important. And so
Yeah.
your ability to feel like you've got a sense of discretion and control over where your time goes is having personal agency. And so rewiring those choices until you really feel like you can claim them is powerful, right? And then
Yeah.
that's what earns you the right to be lit up because you're doing the work you're meant to do. So I refer to that as possibilities and purpose. Like, if you know how to have a powerful day and you know how to have a productive week, then you can have a purposeful life where you're steering it
Yeah.
towards something that you feel that deep sense of satisfaction in. So when people say like, well, you seem like you have it all together, I mean, it's always humbling and gratifying, but I think that's what they're seeing. Like what they're reacting to is that formula is working in my life, it's working in my clients' lives, and it really is a game changer when you even imperfectly start to adopt that.
Yeah, I love that idea too, that it actually is this formula that you're saying, because I think there's this misconception. It's like, oh, well, some people are just born that way, or oh, some people, they just wake up like that,
Mhm.
or whatever it is. And it's like, no, it takes them the same amount of time to do their makeup as it takes you to do it. Like nobody actually is just like, oh, yay. Well, I mean, some people enjoy going to the gym, but everybody has to
Do the work.
get motivated to go put in the work. And so I like that idea that it is actually a formula. And if you're finding yourself short in an area, then there are some things you can do to bring up that energy level, getting
Yeah.
outside, getting fresh air, drinking water, like
Yes. I mean, the
moving
worst
your
thing you
body.
can do is tell yourself it is what it is. Well,
Yes. Oh, I
it is what
hate
it
that thing. I
is.
hate
Right.
that
I'll
so
just
much.
tough it out. It'll be fine. And I think especially once we have children, there's this somehow we've bought into this cultural narrative that it's okay to fall apart at the seams and that,
Yeah.
we're like misery loves company and let's just all be a mess together. And I'm not suggesting that we have to be perfect by
Yeah.
any stretch, right? I mean, as soon as this is over, my hair's going on top of my head and, I'm taking the crown off, right? Like
No.
that's what will happen. But I am suggesting that we can reach for a standard where we feel good, right? Where
Yeah.
we feel, and there's so many controllable factors along that path.
What do you think, I mean, is that something that you've always, like, had that positive mindset, or are there certain things that worked better for you than others to kinda get you there?
Well, I think we learn from our mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So when I was younger, like let's say in my 20s and early 30s, I mean, I think my motto was, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Like I
Yeah.
just am not interested. I have too much to do. This is an exciting world. And I did not think I required a lot of sleep. And that broke me. Like at some point, you
Yeah.
realize like, boy, I am not up. There is a vicious cycle that is kicked off by not getting enough sleep. So for me, that cycle looks like, okay, I'm really tired behind my eyes in the morning. So then I'm
Mhm.
frustrated with what I look like. So then I don't make good choices because I already feel like I've lost the battle, right? So then I'm not
Yeah.
eating well because my willpower is like diminished, and then I'm trying to soothe myself with other behaviors, and you're just in this like vicious cycle of trying to make yourself feel better
Yes.
while resisting the one thing that would actually work,
So true.
right? So when you flip that script and say, all right, fundamentally important to me is that I am going to get enough sleep. Now look
Mhm.
at this magical thing that happens as soon as you say that, you have by definition limited your waking hours, right? You took
Ooh.
away your overflow capacity of like, well, I'll just stay up late to finish this.
Yeah.
I'll just stay up late to do something, like to watch Netflix because I haven't had any downtime today. If you're committed that like sleep matters and it's going to be 8 hours or whatever it is, then you've defined what are your waking hours. And you, by
Mm.
definition, start making choices about what stays in and what doesn't, right? So, like, then you're in a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious one.
Ooh, that's so good. A virtuous cycle versus a vicious cycle. That'll preach. That's good. That's so good. I've recently been on a health journey, and one of the big things was getting more sleep. And I didn't realize I was definitely in that same category of like, I'll sleep when I'm dead
Right.
kind of thing. Like there's enough to do. I'll stay up late. I'll get up early, like pour the coffee, let's go. But I didn't realize how much of your health is connected to that
Oh,
sleep. So
it's brutal. You're fighting such an uphill battle, right? If you
you
don't have
are.
sufficient sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I love that you touched on that because it's like that's been a very big pain point in my life recently of
People
just
are
like,
like,
"Oh,
"I
you need
can't
to
work
get
out. I just can't work out. I can't do it." I'm like, "How much sleep are you getting?" 4 hours. Well, I can't work out either if I'm getting 4 hours of sleep. I don't
yeah,
want to do
because
it.
you're tired."
Right, your body is, like, fighting to conserve energy. It is not gonna give you permission to go expend a bunch of it, right?
No. I guess in that same vein, um, I feel like talking about like clearing off your plate or like taking away that overflow kind of thing. It seems like we live in a culture that really prioritizes busy. Do you think that's true? And if so, I something tells me you probably do think that's true. So, um, is there a way to kind of like combat that a little bit? Like, how do you stop prioritizing busy?
Yes. So, I think of this like church. This
Okay.
if you look at how most of the world operates, right? It is antithetical to what you would find in a church environment. So why do
Yeah.
people go to church? They're like, because I'm going to choose a different way and I'm going to be in community with people who see this the way I want to see it and who are going to hold me accountable. And we're all going to kind of be like anti mainstream culture with whatever value system it is. I think
Yeah.
it's the same way. Like we are living in a culture of busy. And unless you are in a community of people who believe what you believe, who say like this is not right. We are
Yeah.
taking ourselves off course by being in this environment, then you're fighting an uphill battle because everyone around you is going to keep reinforcing busy. Right?
Yes.
Like that's going to be the conversation at work. It's going to be the conversation in the neighborhood. It's going to be the conversation at the store. Like, how are you doing? So busy. Right? Oh
Yes.
my gosh, we haven't had dinner one night this week. I'm here picking up takeout because I just can't imagine
Totally.
how we would ever, have to go through this drive-through tonight or oh, we're going to be at another travel tournament. And those are fundamentally choices, right? So
Yes.
if we want to stand in opposition to that, and I don't think the opposite of busy is like bored. I think the opposite of busy is rhythm, right?
Mm.
Busy to me implies like we're out of rhythm. We're just like frenzied, rush, rush, rush. But what we want is rhythm. We want to have a sense of control over when we're exerting and when we're recovering. Right. Like I
Mm.
run really hard during my day. I love it. I'm like a lot of juice at work. Right. So you can ask anybody on my team. I have 8 women on my team, and it is like, it is a go culture in there. Right. Super action oriented, fast paced, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But then
Yeah.
I want downtime. Right? And I don't want my kids to be in 5 activities every night. I wanna have us
Yeah.
have a family dinner, and I want them to go to bed on time, and I wanna model for them that your homework has to be done before our agreed bedtime so that you can have the rest you need. Otherwise, what do they
Okay.
grow up to be? The same thing you and I tried to outgrow. So,
Yes.
there's so much modeling that, when we take control over this and say, "How do I want to design it? What do I want my life to look like?" And then we can create that in our own homes, right? But it's so much better to do in community with like-minded people than to try to be the only one, like the only one carrying the torch for not being crazy busy all the time.
So true. So true. I think there's a really powerful source that comes from being in a like-minded community and with like-minded people who encourage you to work really hard, who aren't shaming you for working so hard, but then also encouraging you to take a pause. So it's like that push and pause
Yeah.
kind of thing. So you need someone who can honor the dance of both, as
That's
you
right.
were saying earlier. Yeah.
I mean, these days, like, so I have 3 kids in school and a husband who works, and I have a company to run. I leave my house typically around 8 to go to the office, which means I'm typically like seated and doing work by 8:30. I am almost always home by 5, right? And
Nice.
then I am rarely doing things after that. And if I am, it's it's a choice to say, okay, I'm going to pop in and handle this thing and then I'm back. But those zones, like the intentionality of saying, this is going to be a family zone because I want to come home and make dinner and I want to be
Yeah.
a part of that evening with my crew, is really important to me. And it doesn't mean I can't have a big business. It doesn't mean I can't have a team. It's just, it had to be designed to deliver that outcome within my constraints.
I love that. I love the idea of putting that design into it too, because if not, I think myself included, people can be very guilty of like, oh, I'm just gonna wake up and work really hard and push, 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 but you never actually have that clear target of what you're aiming for, or you don't have that clear visual of what success looks like.
Right.
And then you wake up and you're frustrated because you didn't hit the target. And it's like, well, kid, you didn't know what the target was.
There wasn't a target, right?
It was your target. Yeah. So I love that idea of like this beautiful balance doesn't just happen. Like it has to be designed and created and maintained. It's not something that you do just one time and you're like, oh, I'm balanced. It's
Oh,
something
so true.
that
It's
you
so true.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dynamic dance.
Dynamic dance. So good.
Mhm.
Well, you're talking about your schedule and your work and then home, and I know we talked a little bit about sleep, but in all of that, do you have any like self-care that you do for yourself? Like how do you find time just for you in all of that? Because I'm definitely super selfish with my time. I like to have some just me time, but I'm
Me
like,
too.
oh.
It's actually on my foundational balance practices in our coaching program. We have everyone establish like what are the things that create a powerful day for you, and one of mine is time alone. So I'm an only child. I grew up with a lot of time alone, and so having three children and pets and a husband is a little untethering sometimes. That there's a lot happening. So I know that every day I need some time alone. So it can be double purposed. Like working
Mm,
out, I tend to work out before anyone else is up. And so
yeah,
for me to work out in our home gym or go outside with nobody needing me is that counts, but I have to have some time every day where nobody needs me. And
I love
as
that.
a mom of three and a team of eight and a bunch of clients, like somebody needs me a lot, right?
A
So it's
lot.
you got to fight pretty hard to protect for that. But my husband and my kids all know like we have a better mom when she has
So
some
good.
time that's like nobody needs her, right? So it's not a lot, Jennifer. It's not hours and hours a day that I
Yeah.
get all to myself. But working out is one time that I do view that way. Getting ready in the morning, which might sound silly, and then there's kind of a meme going around the internet of like, does that count? But I do think it counts. I think if I can be in my bathroom doing hair and makeup and getting dressed and like playing my music or listening to a
Yeah.
podcast, like that's time alone and it
Yeah.
counts. And it wasn't always that way, right? With younger kids, you had somebody competing for that time. Um, and I try every weekend to get out for a little bit of a more extended time alone, even
Yeah.
if it's to do something like, you know, mindlessly shop someplace where again, nobody needs me and I can kind of be invisible there. That's powerful. I love to read.
Me
So I,
too.
s- I do read a lot, although my husband teases me that I read in odd ways. Like I don't sit down and like read a whole book doing nothing else. Like I can read while I'm drying my hair or I can like,
Oh, I love
yeah,
that.
kind of odd habits, but I do manage to get a lot read in these weird ways.
That's so good.
Mhm.
I try to just always my husband runs late to a lot of things, so I just try to keep a book on me and I just, like, pick up the book and I'm like, "You know what? Instead of getting mad, just read a couple pages."
Yes.
Like
I've started taking the mini iPad to, like, appointments, where you have to wait and you're, like, 2 minutes
yes.
here, 20 minutes there.
You can get
Helpful.
a lot in those, like, in
Yeah.
between moments.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's so good. Well, gosh, I love it so much. I don't wanna take up too much of your time, but I guess one of the other questions I wanted to make sure we touched on was this idea of how do you know like I'm trying to think of how to say it. If someone's in their right element, I imagine that it would be easier to get into the flow or to find joy in it. But for people who are thinking maybe they're not in the right place in life, like if they're not in the right career, they wanted something different, do you have any suggestions on like how to know when it's time to drop that and kind of move on to something different? Like how did you know that it was time to give up the corporate career and
Right.
and follow your pursuit of your business.
Yes. Well, my case may be a little bit different, maybe, but I liked the way you asked the question about like, how would people know? And
Yeah.
I think it comes down to energy. So when we were talking about a powerful day, right? If you are already optimizing all the physical practices, like you're getting enough sleep and you're eating well and you're hydrating well and you're moving your body, and you're already managing like the emotional practices where you've got some time alone or your relationships are all intact. Like if you've shored up everything else and you still don't feel energized, it's
Yeah.
probably your work, right? So kind of
So
by
true.
process of elimination, you can say, look, a life lived well is like you're making a contribution, like your work matters to you and you know
Mhm.
that you're using your gifts and talents and that somebody is benefiting. A life lived well, you've got strong connections, right? And you've
Yeah.
curated it so that it fits. So if you've done those other things and you're like, "Ugh, this isn't working," it's probably the work. And
Yeah.
you'll see symptoms. You'll see people who are like, "I don't want Sunday to end," right? Because Monday
Mhm.
is, what do we call it? The Sunday scaries, right? Monday
Sunday
is like
scaries, yeah.
I mean, I think that's a good if you have a sense of dread on Sunday nights, it's a good sign that you don't love what Mondays look like, right? If
Yeah.
you're coming home from work and numbing out, like I'm
Mhm.
drinking or I'm snacking or I'm watching TV all night or playing video games or whatever it is, those are symptoms of like I am trying to not feel something about the
Yeah.
way I feel, right? If you're angry and agitated all the time, those are good signals that you could probably feel a whole lot better doing different work. So that's when it's probably time to, do some soul searching or reach out to somebody who can help you do an exploration. We have a career agility program in my company that is really good at helping people who are like on the precipice of change but aren't really sure what they want to change to. It's kind of like a
Ooh,
figure out what you want to be when you grow up,
I love
program.
that.
And it's remarkable how we can like excavate the insights from their past and some of their like personal brand attributes to figure out like, well, what would you be really well suited to? What would excite you? And then give them the courage
Wow.
to like go after that.
What a great program. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a great place for to ask you the big question for anybody who wants to have a deeper conversation with you. For anybody who wants to sign up for one of your courses, where can they sign up for that, and what would that look like? I guess women who you're currently working with, are they all entrepreneurs, or like what are the like what
That would be
qualifies to
so
come
I
be
would
part of
say
your
our core audience is professional women, um, often working moms, but not always, right? Who really want to be rock stars at work and at home. Like they're people
yeah,
who want to play big at work and they want to play big at home and they're trying to figure out how to navigate those pieces. That's really our core audience. Often those people are thinking about a career change of some kind or a career escalation, like they really want to kind of gun for the big promotion,
nice.
or they are struggling with calendar and productivity and like, how am I going to get my arms around my life?
Yeah,
Um, like those are two really big kind of vectors in, I would say. But the notion of figuring out, am I at a midlife pivot? Do I want to change something pretty substantial about my life? That's often where we cross paths with people. The best way to find us is you can Google Brilliant Balance or go to brilliant-balance.com. That'll take
okay.
you to the website, point you to all of our assets like the podcast. You can schedule a consultation. You can get some free downloads, like kind of home base for everything online.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, which I hope you did, make sure you subscribe so that you never miss what's next. If you really enjoyed it, I'd be super grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes or anywhere that you listen. And if you really enjoyed it, then I'd love if you'd share it with a friend. Last but not least, make sure you're following us on Instagram at The Vendor's Daughter for a behind the scenes look at my personal and professional life, and for what I hope is a little bit of daily inspiration as we walk this crazy journey together.